Unlike regular Call of Duty multiplayer, which can play out in a semi-predictable way, Warzone is highly variable, which make creating a graphics comparison more complex. With that in mind, I created a list of key comparisons I wanted to show for each mode, so that directly comparing the consoles was as close as I could possibly achieve. I'm going to start the comparison using the 60 FPS mode on both consoles, and later I'll compare the 120 FPS mode. For all game settings, please see the description. From the beginning of the video, I've shown the initial skydive from the plane to the Seaport district. The base PS5 clearly has a lower resolution, leading to a softer, more blurry image. The resolution difference also means that details at a distance are clearer on Pro, even though I don't believe the view distance has been changed. Please bear in mind throughout this comparison that the game engine behind Warzone uses dynamic resolution, so at times both consoles can look sharper or softer depending on load. Okay, moving into the GULAG. Since the GULAG is a more compact area with less going on, the PS5 and Pro look similar, which just goes to show the dynamic resolution scaling is doing its job. I think in this case I'm pleased with how the base PS5 is doing, since it's probably the biggest platform for the game and looks and runs fine here. Next, I'm going to show a series of 7 gunfights with a mixture of guns and target distances. I've tried to match the gun category and length of gunfight as much as possible. While the first 3 gunfights are not at the same location, the PS5 clearly drops resolution now we're back out the GULAG, while I think the Pro remains unchanged in resolution. Granted, the gas effect on the PS5 side here will probably be taxing on the GPU. Over the next 4 gunfights I noticed one difference I wanted to highlight, which is texture resolution seems a little bit lower on the base PS5. It's hard to see during gunfights, which is why I'm going to show environments in isolation in a few moments. Looking at the gunfight at the football field and farm in particular, I found it significantly easier to spot the target on the Pro than the base PS5, as the character model was significantly clearer. The next 5 comparisons will focus on environments with no gunfights. During the pan across the water, I noticed on PS5 parts of the image were fizzling, and this was not present on Pro. While I am a bit closer to the water on Pro, the image is visually softer on base PS5, and therefore while the water model seems exactly the same, perceptible level of detail is higher on the Pro. The differences continue in the pan shot from the top of the tower as well. In all honesty, I expected the grass on Pro to look much better than it does. While the Pro may have a higher resolution, the grass, both in movement and while standing still, is quite low fidelity. I wanted to include Burger Town simply because it's a nod to the OG Modern Warfare 2, which I appreciate, but surprisingly it's hard to spot many real differences at this location, besides the exterior resolution boost for Pro. It's still interesting to know that based on this location alone, interiors provide close parity between the two consoles. I thought the Manor would be another good location to compare interior quality, but in the same vein to Burger Town, there isn't much to separate the two consoles beside the recurring high resolution on Pro. I think by this point it's evident that the initial skydive and outside locations prove to have the bigger difference, while the GULAG and building interiors show a very minor difference between the two consoles. My expectations for the farm was for better details and textures for the grass and foliage on Pro. If there are any differences to the grass, it's tiny at best. While I did think the texture resolution was slightly higher on Pro, it's honestly not much to shout about, as both consoles still look pretty smudgy in this area of the map. Time to compare the 120 FPS modes. Obviously I cannot show 120 FPS gameplay on YouTube, but the footage still represents the visuals you can expect on both consoles in this mode. For transparency, I recorded gameplay directly on the consoles. In high frame rate mode, the base PS5 records at 1080p and not 4K, but I honestly don't think the game's resolution would be much above 1080p at 120 FPS regardless. Even taking into account what I've just said, the gulf between the two consoles in 120 FPS mode is pretty wide. The Pro manages to maintain a higher resolution here despite the doubling in frame rate, however the base PS5 on the other hand suffers big time in order to get to 120 FPS. The base PS5 appears blurry and soft in its presentation, and in terms of performance the frame rate is better, but I still found the game never felt smooth. My guesstimate would be that the base PS5 achieves around 90 to 100 FPS in moments of stress, and does hit the 120 FPS target in downtime. The Pro also didn't feel 100% smooth due to network-related stutters, which also apply to the base PS5. The Pro did seem to fare a little better though, both in moments of stress and during downtime. The last point I wanted to make is that on PlayStation 5, while it's worth playing in 120 FPS mode for the improved frame rate and better input response, I do find that in some conditions the low resolution and especially reduced detail at a distance makes faraway targets hard to spot, at which point it's a disadvantage to be playing in this mode rather than the 60 FPS mode. I still think the trade-off is worth it, but just wanted to highlight this. I'm going to leave the rest of the comparison to play out. If you found this comparison interesting, please drop the video a like and subscribe for more graphics comparisons in the future. Thank you very much for watching.
Hostile UAV in the area.